The hardest truths are those that find us in the quiet, in the aftermath of relationships, when silence replaces connection, when memories still haunt each corner of your living space. You scroll through feeds, caught in loops of wondering. What are they doing now? Who are they with? Have they changed, grown, forgotten you entirely? Perhaps you've done what most do, crafted imaginary conversations, pictured chance encounters, dreamed of vindication. The human mind, so brilliant at creating theaters of what might never come. But what if you reversed this current? What if, instead of imagining yourself in their world, you imagined them in yours? Watching, witnessing, seeing who you truly are becoming. 7 days of living as if they could see everything, every choice, every moment of growth or stagnation, every act of courage or surrender. What would change? Everything, as it turns out. We live in the shadows of departed relationships, sometimes for years. Their ghostly presence shapes us in ways we rarely acknowledge, keeping us tethered to versions of ourselves that no longer serve. The philosopher Seneca understood this peculiar human tendency. "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," he wrote. Our minds construct elaborate prisons from the materials of past connections. These emotional architectures become invisible constraints. We make choices to impress phantoms. We avoid paths that might expose our vulnerability. We perform for audiences that have long left the theater. What I'm about to share isn't about winning someone back. It's about reclaiming yourself. About using the energy of that lingering connection to catapult yourself into authenticity rather than illusion. Kierkegaard, the existentialist philosopher, spoke of this when he wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. The vertigo we feel when we realize we alone author our existence. When a relationship ends, we face this terrifying freedom anew. We can become anything, anyone. The script we'd been co-writing suddenly becomes solely ours to continue or discard. This experiment, living for 7 days as if your ex could see everything you do, becomes not about them at all. It becomes a mirror reflecting who you are becoming without them. Day 1 began with immediate discomfort. The morning ritual, usually private and shambling, suddenly felt exposed. Would they see the disarray of my living space, the scattered ambitions, the aimless scrolling? I made my bed, not for them, though initially it felt that way, but because the imagined gaze forced a confrontation with my own standards, long compromised in the name of heartbreak. The philosopher Foucault spoke of the panopticon, a prison designed so inmates never knew when they were being watched. This uncertainty created self-policing, a constant internal surveillance. What happens when we willingly place ourselves in such a position? When we choose to live as if observed by the one person who once knew us intimately? The ordinary becomes extraordinary. The mundane becomes sacred. The casual choices of each day become weightier, more intentional. We begin living deliberately, aware of our authorship. By day 2, I noticed something peculiar. My digital habits shifted dramatically. The endless doom-scrolling, the vacant staring at screens. It felt differently shameful under this imagined gaze. Not because they would judge, but because I was judging myself. Using their eyes as borrowed tools to see my own surrender to distraction, to witness my avoidance of the present moment. We often speak of heartbreak as something that happens to us, but what if it's also something we actively perpetuate? A story we continue telling ourselves, reinforced through 1,000 tiny choices each day. The philosopher Sartre said, "We are our choices." In the aftermath of love, we often forget this fundamental truth. We believe we are our feelings, our wounds, our memories. But feelings pass like weather. Wounds heal if we allow them. Memories lose their sharp edges. What remains are the choices we make in response to all these temporary states. By day 3, the experiment evolved. The imagined gaze became less about impressing and more about honesty. Would they see me trying? Not performing, but genuinely attempting to grow. I found myself opening that book I'd meant to read for months, making that difficult phone call, writing those words that had been waiting to emerge, not for their approval, but for my alignment. There's a strange alchemy in using someone's absence to become more present, in transforming the pain of what's lost into fuel for what might be found. "The obstacle is the way," wrote Marcus Aurelius. What if the very person whose absence haunts you becomes the catalyst for your most profound presence? What if loss becomes the doorway? By day 4, I noticed changes in my physical space. Clearing clutter felt like clearing mental space. Arranging flowers on the table felt like arranging new possibilities in my life. The Japanese concept of ma, the meaningful emptiness, the space between, began to resonate. Perhaps relationships end not just to break us, but to create necessary emptiness where new growth can occur. We fear this emptiness. We rush to fill it with noise, with distractions, with premature connections. But what if we learned to honor it instead? To see it not as absence, but as potential? In the quiet of that 4th evening, I wrote a letter I never intended to send. Not about reconciliation or blame, but about gratitude. For what I learned, for how I grew, for what remains. This wasn't about them anymore. The imagined observer had become merely a tool, a way to access deeper honesty with myself, to witness my own journey with compassionate clarity. Day 5 brought unexpected tears, not of longing, but of recognition. I saw clearly how I'd been living in a strange limbo, neither fully embracing their absence nor truly embracing my solitary presence. Philosopher Martin Buber wrote of the I-thou relationship, where we fully recognize another's sacred subjectivity. But perhaps there's also the I relationship, where we fully witness ourselves with the same reverence. This experiment was teaching me that. To see myself not through the lens of someone else's potential judgment, but through the compassionate gaze of my own becoming. I began to move differently, to speak with more intention, to choose words that aligned with emerging values rather than old patterns. Small shifts, barely perceptible, yet seismic in their implications. By day 6, something profound occurred. The imagined observer began to fade. Not because the exercise had failed, but because it had succeeded beyond its original purpose. I no longer needed the borrowed eyes. I had reclaimed my own vision. I could see myself clearly, the struggle, the growth, the contradictions, the beauty, without the intermediary of another's gaze. In Eastern philosophy, there's the concept of the witness consciousness, that part of us that observes without judgment, that watches our thoughts, feelings, and actions with detached compassion. This experiment had awakened that witness within me. I was learning to see myself not as they might see me, but as I truly am, complete with flaws, with potential, with the entire universe of possibility. The final day arrived with a startling revelation. I had been using their imagined presence as a crutch, a way to avoid the terrifying freedom of being entirely responsible for my own becoming. Sartre's words echoed again. Man is condemned to be free. Without the relationship, without their gaze, real or imagined, I faced the exhilarating terror of complete authorship over my life's direction. What emerged was not perfection, but authenticity, not performance, but presence, not the person they knew, nor someone entirely different, but someone evolving at the precise pace that evolution requires. The subtle transformation extended beyond private moments. Colleagues noticed a different quality in my contributions. Friends commented on a new steadiness in my presence. Strangers responded differently to my energy. This wasn't about becoming better in some competitive sense. It was about becoming more aligned, more congruent. The person I presented to the world increasingly matching the person I was becoming within. If this experiment resonates with you, perhaps you're standing at that same threshold, between who you were in that relationship and who you might become in its aftermath. Consider this not as a technique for manipulating emotions, yours or theirs, but as a portal to deeper authenticity, a way to transmute the energy of loss into the fuel of becoming. Because the most powerful transformation doesn't happen when someone is watching. It happens when you finally see yourself clearly, when you witness your own journey with the compassion it deserves. The philosopher Heraclitus said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." You are not who you were when that relationship ended. Neither are they. The person you imagine watching is, in truth, a memory, a construction. The real human has continued their own journey, changed by their own rivers. This recognition liberates. It frees you from performing for ghosts, from seeking validation from memories, from measuring your growth against imaginary metrics of what might impress someone who is no longer present. In the silence that follows this realization comes a profound peace. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of integration, of honoring what was while fully embracing what is becoming. Should your paths cross again someday, in person, through mutual connections, or even just in the quiet of memory, what will matter isn't whether they notice how you've changed. What will matter is that you noticed, that you witnessed your own becoming, that you honored your journey enough to live it consciously, deliberately, authentically, whether anyone was watching or not. Perhaps that's the ultimate gift of lost connections. They teach us eventually to connect most profoundly with ourselves, to become, at last, both the observer and the observed, the witness and the witnessed. In the end, we discover the most important gaze was never theirs. It was always our own, seeing ourselves clearly, compassionately, truthfully, beyond the distortions of either attachment or aversion. And in that clear seeing lies freedom. Not freedom from memory or feeling, but freedom to author the next chapter, to step into the river of becoming, changed and changing still.